Starmer's first 100 days as Prime Minister have indeed seen their fair share of choppy waters. It's been like it's been like a white water rafting session, as he himself has admitted in a candid interview on BBC's newscast. After 14 years out of office, Labour's return was expected to be more robust than it actually has been, and instead the first quarter of Starmer's premiership has been a rocky initiation marked by both teething pains and unforeseen scandals reminiscent of the Blair era, yet under entirely different political conditions. And in many ways, the sleaze has been reminiscent of the sort of things that we've seen at the end of the Conservative Party. Starmer came in with a focus on stabilising the NHS, addressing living standards and rebuilding Britain. And early wins included resolving long-standing pay disputes with health service workers, demonstrating a commitment to ameliorating NHS issues. Nevertheless, Matthew Taylor of the NHS Confederation points out that the health service remains under considerable strain, unable to allocate new funds effectively to address winter pressures, and this underscores a persistent challenge. Labour's promises to the NHS are grand, but the execution is hampered by resource limitations and rising patient backlogs. One notable mishap was the mishandling of the Sue Gray affair. The former Chief of Staff's abrupt resignation led to weeks of infighting and negative, or after weeks of infighting and negative press have hinted at internal chaos. Starmer's subsequent appointment of Morgan McSweeney as Chief of Staff was aimed at righting the ship, though McSweeney's impact will only truly be manifest in time. Another PR miscalculation came with the Transport Secretary Louise Haig's public boycott call against P&O ferries yesterday. Starmer had to distance himself from her remarks as they jeopardised a £1 billion port investment by DP World, a setback for a government branding itself as pro-business. Starmer's administration has also faced scrutiny over the gifts and hospitality, the sleaze, culminating in the Prime Minister's repayment of over £6,000. Well, that's modest in comparison to the amount of money that he's received from Lord Ali. This added to a growing perception of a government scrambling to control the optics. These incidents, coupled with internal strife, have sapped the Labour Party of some of the goodwill it might have garnered from its election victory. And Starmer's predicament is often compared to Tony Blair's early days in 1997 or Mrs. Thatcher's early days in the late 1970s. But the parallels are thin. Blair's government, though embroiled in its own scandals like the Eccleston affair, enjoyed a broad and enthusiastic mandate, a luxury Starmer lacks. Blair's New Labour faced primarily a Conservative opposition, but Starmer now finds his party encircled by a multi-party threat from Reform, the Lib Dems and the Greens, as well as the Conservatives, when they finally get their act together. Starmer's Labour Party is assailed from all sides. Despite holding on to about two-thirds of the council seats in recent by-elections, Labour's performance here has lagged behind that of Blair's era, when it retained roughly 80%. The voter landscape today is less tribal, and Labour's support in 2024 is far from the affectionate backing seen in Blair's time. Starmer's leadership is seen as tepid, with his approach to governance described as playing it safe. Indeed, his approval ratings have been inconsistent, trailing those of Blair, who enjoyed sustained public favour early on. Reflecting on the new role, Starmer described his tenure as much tougher than anything I've done before, but much better. Living in Downing Street has brought adjustments, with Starmer relaying personal anecdotes about seeing his children for brief moments in the day, a small solace amid the demanding job. Despite these lighter moments, the prevailing tone from Starmer remains one of facing an uphill battle. Looking forward, Starmer signalled that the upcoming budget would target key campaign promises, especially on living standards and NHS recovery. However, Labour's current position seems precarious. Starmer's efforts to project economic stability and attract investment are hampered by a series of missteps and evolving threat of rival parties, with the Conservatives in disarray at the moment and contenders like Robert Jenrick or Kemi Badenoch not expected to make significant inroads. allowing Labour to avoid catastrophic losses in the first past the post scenario. But nevertheless, even with that distraction, Labour is not doing well enough. The Reform, Greens, Lib Dems encroaching, Labour's hold on power feels tentative. As Starmer has noticed, there's always going to be choppy days, choppy moments, but whether Labour can smooth these waters and regain momentum remains an open question. The next 100 days will be critical in defining Starmer's premiership and determining whether his government can transform from a faltering administration into a formidable one capable of enduring more than a single term. My hunch is that it won't be Starmer's success that will determine whether Labour gets a second term, but the Conservative Party's failure. Much in much the same way that I don't think that it was Starmer's success, particularly, that guaranteed his party an election victory at the last general election. It was the failure, the absolute failure, of a series of Conservative prime ministers.